Loudwire put out a new article. Every Big Four thrash metal album ranked worst to best. And I just want to kind of take a look at this. And at first I was just going to read it, but then I thought, why don't I react to this? That might be fun, right? So I got a can of root beer here. I know you can't see it. You can only see my screen. And then I'm going to react to this. And I have a feeling this is going to be a divisive list. Loudwire has always been a little controversial in its picks, in my opinion. So let's see what they pick for the bottom album. There's 49. At number 49, we have, let's see, Super Collider by Megadeth. Really? Really? That's what you think the worst thrash album is? It's not even a thrash album. It's more of a hard rock album for Megadeth. And also, I could think of like 3 that could have been for number 49 that are far worse than Super Collider. Super Collider is not Megadeth's best material by a long shot. I'm not saying that. Megadeth has way better albums. Even its most recent albums, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, and Dystopia, which came after Super Collider, are far better albums, but I would not put this as the worst Megadeth album. If we were going to put a Megadeth album as the bottom spot, I would have put Risk. But honestly, I think that what would have been deserving for number 49 is Metallica's Saint Anger. I think that is the worst thrash album ever made. Or to put that dastardly nu metal album Slayer did in the late 90s. That thing sucked. And if it has to be a Megadeth album, put Risk. I mean, Risk was... it was shit. It was a piece of... That's what it was, all right? And I do not think that Super Collider really deserves to be torn apart this badly. Okay. At number 48, what we have? Volume 8, The Threat is Real. Understandable. Not the best Anthrax record, honestly. I kind of could see it. I could see this as being the worst Anthrax record, actually. I can kind of understand the logic here. They had a different singer at the time who wasn't very good. Well, he was good, but just not good for Anthrax. He was good on the Sounds of White Noise album. I'll give him that. That Sound of White Noise record, really good. But I would definitely say Volume 8 is the weakest Anthrax record. So I'm not going to argue with you there. That's we agree there. At number 47, we have Risk. Yeah, this album was a risk, all right. There was only one good song on this album, and that was the opener, Insomnia. The rest of it was just weird, and even some of the songs, like Crush 'Em, were just really cringy tracks. I was disappointed by Megadeth with this album, because Megadeth's actually my favorite band of the Big Four, but this is not a highlight in any of the Big Four's discography, honestly. This is... I think Super Collider is a better record. I'm going to say it. I think that Super Collider has some actually interesting material. The song Burn and Kingmaker are actually good Megadeth songs. So, honestly, I think Super Collider is better, not worse. But according to Loudwire, Super Collider is worse than this, which I disagree. Next up, we have... Yeah, Stomp 442 wasn't that good, and they point out this was a little bit more of a punk album. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, Stomp 442 was less thrash and more punk, which I like punk, by the way. I mean, the Sex Pistols is good music, and there were so many good punk bands. Anthrax as a punk band, I'm sorry to say it, because I know there are fans of the John Bush era, but this just does not work. And again, I like the John Bush album Sounds of White Noise. Again, I like that album. This album just doesn't work. It's okay. There are a few good songs on this album. I will say there's a few songs that I can appreciate. But, it's not that good. Would I prefer this over Volume 8? Yeah, for sure. This is definitely more interesting than Volume 8. I'll give it that. But Volume 8 isn't really that, that's not a very impressive margin to surpass, considering Volume 8's not that good. It's not really that hard to really surpass Volume 8, to be honest. Next up, we have The World Needs a Hero by Megadeth. Yeah, I can understand this as well. Uh, Megadeth's World Needs a Hero was a little bit. I mean, there was Dread in the Fugitive Mind, which is like a live staple to this day, and one of Megadeth's better songs in the 2000s. Like, it was definitely a better late Megadeth song. And I did like Moto Psycho and 1000 Times Goodbye from that album, but those are really the only songs from World Needs a Hero that I go back to out of my way to listen to, really. I don't hear these other songs like the title track or anything unless I actually decide to listen to The World Needs a Hero as an album as a whole, which I do occasionally, but not often considering the album's only a mid album. Like, if I want to listen to a 2000s Megadeth album, I would go with United Abominations or Endgame, to be honest. I would not go with this one. Even The System Has Failed has better material, and I would actually pick that over this. World Needs a Hero, not so much. I would say it was the weakest album of the 2000s. Megadeth kind of had two albums in the row. Like, we just had one that was bad and then one that was really mid. We had Risk and then The World Needs a Hero. So Megadeth was in a little bit of a slump at this time. I would say the departure of Nick Menza really hurt Megadeth for a few years because Nick Menza left after Cryptic Writings, and then they made Risk, and then Marty Friedman left, and they made The World Needs a Hero, and I think they were trying to do a comeback metal album, but Dave, I think, just that energy was kind of, I think Marty and Nick, when they left Megadeth, kind of took some of the band's energy with them. They kind of walked out the door with some of the band's energy, so there wasn't as much energy or strong songwriting or anything in the Megadeth camp at this time, because I think Dave did most of the writing for The World Needs a Hero, and those 90s Megadeth albums were more collaborative, which I think made them more interesting and made them come up with better and more cohesive songs. So honestly, The World Needs a Hero is only okay. There it is, Saint Anger. And yes, they do rank it as the worst Metallica album on this list. It's the first time we see a Metallica album, and it is not good. Not by a long shot. Every song on this album sucks except for the Unnamed Feeling, which is pretty interesting lyrically, and the snare drum is less loud, I guess would be the best way to put it. It's still there, but it's just less eminent, I guess, because like for the most of this album just sounds like someone went to, back in the 2000s when you could go to like 7-Eleven or like another knockoff gas station or like convenience store, and they would have those like big metal trash cans. Yeah, it sounds like Lars went to a 2000. It sounds like Lars Ulrich took a 2003 7-Eleven trash can and then started banging on it. That's what Saint Anger sounds like to me. It is not good. It almost sounds like when a toddler plays with pots and pans. When 2-year-olds like to bang two pots and pans together. That's what I think of when I hear this album. I think of the kids my mom babysits. My mom's a nanny, and I just picture like the kids my mom babysits banging pots and pans when I listen to this album. Which is not often, by the way. This is the last Metallica album that I go out of my way. Like, Master of Puppets, I go for, usually is my first. I always go for Master of Puppets or Injustice for All. Not Saint Anger. I would even go for, like, Death Magnetic over this. And that was the follow-up, which had some mixing issues of its own, but it was definitely less repulsive. And definitely had more interesting material. There was even some cringe on this album, like the song Frantic. I don't even know what that song was trying to achieve, but this is just... I will say this album would have been better, though, if it, didn't have the snare. Because aside from Frantic, some of the lyricism on Saint Anger is actually pretty creative and good. The band was in a dark space at the time. No one was getting along. They were kind of writing songs separately, and they were writing about their feelings. So this album, honestly, could have been great. This almost could have been like the Beatles' White Album, when like everyone in the Beatles wasn't getting along and they were writing songs separately, and like the later Beatles albums just ended up being masterpieces despite being apart. Yeah, I think that the snare had been removed and Kirk was allowed to play some more solos. This could have lived up as like one of the best Metallica albums of all time. I do think that. I do think that removal of the snare, if there had been no snare, people would be looking back on this Metallica album and labeling it as one of the best of their career because of the amazing lyricism. And also, the guitar tuning wasn't that bad. I kind of liked Kirk's playing on the album, but again, the snare just ruins it for me. It's shit. Let's move down. All right. We have Metallica's Load. We have another Metallica one. I disagree. I think Reload's worse. I honestly would put Reload below Load, honestly. I do think Load has far more... like, Reload almost feels like the leftovers of Load, but less interesting material. And I'm a Load fan, by the way. A lot of people don't like it. But actually, Load has some pretty interesting material. Ain't My Bitch, King Nothing, The House Jack Built. Even that bluesy song, that very experimental bluesy song, Mama Said, I even liked that. And a lot of people don't like it. But I like experimentation in my metal. But I did not, like Reload at all. And I think that Reload would have been a better choice. And then we have more Anthrax. Okay. State of Euphoria. Really? State of Euphoria is not that bad. I would have put Fistful of Metal in this spot, honestly. Fistful of Metal was kind of it was probably the weakest debut out of the four. Metallica had Kill 'Em All. Metallica had Ride the Light. Not Ride the Lightning, that came after it. Metallica had Kill 'Em All. Megadeth had Killing Is My Business. Slayer had Show No Mercy. And Anthrax had Fistful of Metal. And honestly, I think that Fistful of Metal was the weakest of the big four debut albums. And not only that, but was just a weak album overall. They had a different... It was their first singer who only lasted one album. The band, you could kind of hear, was like only starting to learn to be a band. Like, there was a low budget for the album. It was very raw and gritty. It was kind of like Killing Is My Business, where a better budget would have helped the album, but because of the low budget, Fistful of Metal just wasn't that good because of the mixing choices. And honestly, I don't think the singer really fit. But like, I think that Fistful of Metal definitely would have been more deserving for this spot. Not State of Euphoria. State of Euphoria is actually a good album. I actually really like it. It's the follow-up to Among the Living, and it's almost just as strong. I don't get... like, this is definitely where I'm going to have to disagree with Loudwire. This is very controversial, in my opinion. Why would you put State of Euphoria this low? Oh, let's move down here. More Anthrax. Oh, boy. Anthrax, We've Come For You All. I would even put We've Come For You All instead of State of Euphoria. Honestly, State of Euphoria belongs to be there, and for Fistful of Metal to be right here, and for State of Euphoria to be farther higher on the list. We've Come For You All is at... what number is this?
Voiceover on. Lamp 41. Anthrax, We've Come For You All. Voiceover off.
This is number 41. Fistful of Metal should have been number 41. Or not Fistful of Metal, but just like a fuck. Honestly, I do think that We've Come For You All could be far more interesting material. I really do think that... let's move on. Number 40, the new metal disaster that Slayer made. Yep, this is definitely their worst. I did not like this album at all. This thing was lame. I'm just going to straight up and say I hate it. There's not much to say. I could rant about this album, but I don't want to be here I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. This thing was just shitty. At number 39, we have 13 by Megadeth. Understandable, again. 13 was just kind of some leftover songs and then added a few. There were some good songs, though. Public Enemy number 1, the title track, Sudden Death. So there was some decent material. Public Enemy number 1, like I said, I really liked that, even though it was very radio friendly. So honestly, I can kind of understand why 13 is only at number 39, honestly. Which isn't even bad because, I mean, there's 4 bands we're ranking here. So honestly, this isn't a bad placement, but still, it's like, I don't blame them. I can agree with them that 13 is not a great Megadeth album. Even Loudwire points out there were fewer sales, and it just kind of didn't live up to the hype because David Ellefson was back in the band. Yeah, definitely agree. 38, Reload. Yep. Again, I think Load would deserve this spot, not Reload, but to each their own. Reload started out really strong. Fuel, The Memory Remains, Devil's Dance, Unforgiven 2. Those first 4 songs were really strong, and then they just kind of went down the hill. Honestly, Reload would have been good as a 4-songs EP, but instead it's this mess, and yeah, I'm not surprised that this is that low. 37, Slayer.